At its peak, Kenya Airways wasn't just an airline. It was a source of African pride and ambition, winning the title of Africa's leading airline year after year. With a modern fleet, Kenya Airways connected 54 destinations around the world, making it one of the continent's most connected carriers. At one point, it even ranked amongst the most profitable airlines globally, serving millions of passengers and giving a huge boost to Kenya's economy. But today, that success story has taken a sharp turn. The airline now holds the record for the largest corporate losses in Kenyan history, with debts of over 300 billion Kenya shillings. Much of this debt has become part of the national debt, leaving ordinary Kenyans to cover the cost.
The people of Kenya have already played their role. They have put 50 billion of their money. Our roads today are not being constructed.
What led to this huge decline? How did the pride of Africa become a cautionary tale? In this episode, we'll uncover the entire history of Kenya Airways, from its beginnings through its privatization and its best years, to the problems and allegations that eventually led to its financial troubles. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe for more in-depth stories from Kenya. To fully understand the Kenya Airways story, we need to go back to 1977. The East African Community, a partnership between Kenya, Tanzania and Uganda, had just fallen apart. With it, East African Airways, EAA, the airline serving all three countries since 1946, also collapsed. Suddenly, Kenya was left without a national airline. As a young nation with big dreams of becoming an economic leader in the region, this was a problem. The Kenyan government wasted no time filling the gap. On January 22, 1977, Kenya Airways was established. Of the 5,000 EAA employees, about 3,000 were Kenyans, many of whom found new jobs at Kenya Airways. The airline officially launched on February 5, 1977, and just a day later, its first flight, coming from London Heathrow, landed in Nairobi. The landing was greeted by excited Kenyans at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Kenya Airways uses the code KQ because KA was already taken by Korean Air, which was established earlier. On February 1977, the new airline started operations with two Boeing 707s leased from British Midland Airways. Kenya Airways also flew planes that it inherited from EAA, like the Douglas DC-9 and three Fokker F-27s. By late 1977, the fleet grew with three more Boeing 707s. However, starting an airline was the easy part. Making it successful was a different challenge. While Kenya Airways had inherited some assets from EAA, it faced tough competition and had inexperienced management. Initially, the airline focused on domestic routes, connecting Nairobi to cities like Mombasa, Kisumu, and Malindi. Although it was a vital service for Kenyans, the airline struggled financially. By 1980, 3 years after its launch, Kenya Airways had grown. It now employed about 2,000 people and operated a mix of planes including Boeing 707s, Boeing 720s, DC-9s, and Fokker F-27s. It expanded its routes across Africa, Europe, and Asia. However, keeping up with the larger international airlines remained a challenge. In 1985, the airline leased an Airbus A310 to modernize its fleet and added two more A310s in 1986. By the late 1980s, the fleet had expanded with Fokker 50s for regional flights and Boeing 757s and 737s for longer distances. Despite this growth, Kenya Airways was struggling financially by the early 90s. The government had planned to privatize the airline as far back as 1986, but slow bureaucracy delayed any real progress until 1991. At that time, Philip Ndegwa, a former CBK governor, was appointed as chairman to lead the privatization effort. His mission was to make Kenya Airways less dependent on the government. He brought in Brian Davies, an aviation expert, as the airline's managing director. Davies made bold moves to cut unnecessary staff, improving efficiency and streamlining operations. Thanks to these efforts, Kenya Airways reported its very first profit in 1994. By 1995, the airline fully embraced privatization. After lengthy discussions, KLM, Royal Dutch Airlines, bought a 26% stake in Kenya Airways for $26 million in 1996. The Kenyan government held on to 23%, while 51% was sold to the public, raising $70 million. At this time, Isaac Omolo Okero succeeded Philip Ndegwa as the new chairman of Kenya Airways. Okero played a role in guiding the airline through the final stages of privatization, overseeing the historic partnership with KLM. His leadership was instrumental in Kenya Airways' transformation from a government-owned, loss-making entity to a profitable enterprise. Under his stewardship, the airline recorded substantial growth, marking its financial turnaround. Okero's hands-on approach helped position Kenya Airways as one of the most respected airlines in Africa, earning it the African Airline of the Year award multiple times. The partnership with KLM brought valuable technical knowledge, better management, and much-needed capital. This helped Kenya Airways enter a new phase of growth and modernization. In 2003, Titus Naikuni became the CEO of Kenya Airways, launching what was meant to be a transformative era for the airline. Naikuni's goal was to establish KQ as a leader in African aviation by modernizing its fleet and forming strategic partnerships. A significant move was the order of 6 Boeing 787 Dreamliners in 2006, aimed at replacing older planes and improving fuel efficiency, which positioned KQ to compete on a global scale. He also secured important alliances, including code-sharing agreements with airlines like KLM, greatly expanding KQ's route network. Code-sharing agreements allowed airlines to sell their seats on each other's flights as if they were their own, meaning customers could book with KQ but fly KLM. In 2007, Kenya Airways made history by joining the SkyTeam Alliance, becoming the very first African airline to do so. This membership opened up access to hundreds of destinations and enhanced KQ's competitive edge. However, the growth was overshadowed by tragedy.
So was it a pilot error? From my initial investigation and my initial report, yes, it was a pilot error. But I think years later, I think something came out of it. And yes, the character of the pilot, whose remains I hear have never been found up until now, even the remains of the first officer, was that the pilot was a man who had taken shortcuts in his career. And he was a man who would not get along with his first officer. So maybe that's what led to the crash in Cameroon.
And standing there, Sam had so much, I don't know what word to use, resentment to KQ.
On May 5th, 2007, Flight 507, a Boeing 737-800, crashed shortly after takeoff from Douala International Airport in Cameroon killing all 114 people on board. This devastating incident raised serious concerns about the airline's safety measures. To regain public trust, Kenya Airways undertook significant safety improvements, investing in pilot training and updating safety systems. Despite these efforts, issues with the airline's operations began to emerge. By 2011, Naikuni announced Project Mawingu, an ambitious expansion plan that aimed at increasing the fleet to 107 aircraft and serving 115 destinations by 2021. This bold vision included orders for more Boeing 787 Dreamliners, Embraer E190s, and Boeing 777-300ERs. However, Project Mawingu relied heavily on debt, with around 95% of the financing coming from loans, raising concerns about KQ's long-term financial health. Alarmingly, it was alleged that the top management did not question the feasibility of this ambitious plan.
I remember when the CEO proposed it, not a single manager made a comment about it, and this was a multi-billion investment.
Project Mawingu's debt dependence wasn't the only problem. The decision to invest heavily in Embraer E190s proved problematic. Although these smaller aircraft had a 96-seat capacity on paper, they typically flew with only 60 passengers due to luggage restrictions. This operational flaw significantly reduced KQ's capacity compared to its larger Boeing aircraft. Routes that once used 120 to 200-seat Boeing 737s had increased flight frequencies to meet demand, which inflated operational costs related to maintenance, fuel, and crew salaries. These higher expenses often fell on the customers, making KQ more expensive for the travelers.
If you take even local routes, you take Fly 540 to Eldoret, you pay 6,000. Kenya Airways, you pay 18,000 one way. From here, Mr. Speaker, to Kampala on Kenya Airways, you pay more than you pay on Ethiopian Airlines from here to China.
Moreover, the Embraer planes required specialized engineers for servicing, adding another layer of complexity. Since 60% of KQ's business was within Africa, these aircraft were intended to support regional expansion. However, many African countries lacked the infrastructure and expertise to service these Embraers.
For instance, on the Embraers, many times we fly with an engineer on board, a third person on board, because there is no service capability in the places
in those
where
airports
we
you're
go
going to.
But that's part of doing business in Africa, as far as I'm concerned.
While the Embraer E190 itself wasn't a bad aircraft, its complicated maintenance requirement made it a poor fit for expanding within Africa, where such specialized support was often unavailable. To make matters worse, the anticipated demand for these regional flights never fully materialized, leaving KQ with underutilized planes and higher operating costs. As a result, keeping the Embraers operational became far more expensive than expected. The aircraft choice also didn't align with Project Mawingu's expansion plan, as they carried less cargo and fewer passengers, which is not ideal when aiming for global expansion.
Africans don't fly to go on holiday.
No.
Africans fly to do business.
Yes.
But Kenya doesn't think so anymore. They are actually flying narrow body to all African destinations. Ethiopian Airlines, on the other hand, is flying what? The Dreamliner. Huh? Dreamliner, which KQ lost out on. You know, KQ was the launch carrier for the Dreamliner.
Yes.
But because of a gain of interest, the Boeing said, fine, it's difficult working with Kenyans. Let's bring in Ethiopians.
yeah.
Further complicating matters, KQ utilized special purpose vehicles, SPVs, like Savo and Samburu to finance its fleet. These SPVs are separate entities designed to manage specific projects and shield the main company, in this case KQ, from financial risks. While SPVs and their uses are a common practice in aviation for leasing aircraft, KQ's approach raised red flags due to a lack of transparency.
Who are the real owners of this company? I don't know that it's called Amboseli and Samburu or something.
Amboseli, Samburu.
Yes. You know, they have Kenyan names, but the owners are lawyers in the UK, and the companies are domiciled in Cayman Island.
Yeah.
You know, that is a warning sign. Even if it's for the DPP, once you see those kind of arrangements, there is something being hidden.
Reports suggested that KQ paid 30 to 40% above market rates for its aircraft leases, with an average lease for an Embraer E190 reportedly costing up to $200,000 per month compared to the market rate, which is only $150,000. This pricing discrepancy fueled allegations of financial mismanagement, leading to suspicions that the SPV structure was being used to hide liabilities and divert funds away from the core operations. There were allegations that some members of the Kenyatta family were involved in the ownership of the planes leased to Kenya Airways through these SPVs. However, Naikoni denied knowing about it when asked by the Senate committee.
Does Uhuru Kenyatta and or his brother George Muhoho or their family have any interest in the SPVs that own the aircrafts?
I don't know whether Uhuru Kenyatta or Mama Ngina Kenyatta or Muhoho owns it.
In 2012, Naikoni oversaw a controversial retrenchment that laid off over 500 experienced staff.
KQ says it has a blotted wage bill of 13.4 billion shillings paid to about 5,000 employees annually. The union is, however, adamant that this money is not spread evenly in the organization.
The unionizable staff, who are 3,800 members, only take 21% of the wage bill. All of 79% are with the management. So if he wants to cut cost on labor, he should start with his management team.
This loss of institutional knowledge hampered KQ's ability to navigate its increasingly complex operations. Compounding these challenges was the lack of aviation expertise on the airline's board, which led to poor strategic decisions, including problematic fleet expansions and the convoluted financing plans like Project Mawingu.
KQ is run by a board who are not aviators. How does that happen? You walk into KLM, American Airlines, British Airways. The people in that board, at least you have to have half of that board, people who understand the business, who have grown in it.
During this period, Ethiopian Airlines, KQ's main competitor in Africa, took a different path. Ethiopian Airlines adopted a simpler fleet strategy with larger Boeing aircraft, maintaining lower operating costs, including pilot salaries. This efficiency allowed Ethiopian to grow steadily, while KQ struggled under the weight of debt and inefficiencies. Furthermore, Ethiopian became the launch customer for the Dreamliner, as they ordered theirs 1 year earlier than KQ, gaining a competitive edge during delays in KQ's deliveries. In 2014, Mbovi Ngunze took over as CEO, inheriting an airline already in financial distress. The airline's financial troubles were exacerbated by several external shocks as well. The 2013 Westgate Mall terrorist attack in Nairobi severely impacted Kenya's tourism industry, a crucial revenue source for KQ. In 2014, the Ebola outbreak in West Africa forced KQ to suspend flights to Liberia and Sierra Leone. Passenger numbers on KQ's West African routes and overall traffic between Europe and Africa also dropped, according to KQ. KQ's partnership with KLM, which began in 1995 when KLM bought a 26% stake in the airline, created additional challenges. The partnership was meant to reduce competition between the two airlines, KLM in Europe and KQ in Africa. But over time, KLM's influence on KQ's board created an uneven playing field. KLM could operate freely in Africa, while KQ was restricted from expanding its European routes beyond Amsterdam, even though other cities had potential. This imbalance raised concerns about fair competition. A controversial deal in 2010 saw KQ buy 2 planes from KLM for $20.5 million. By 2015, KQ had to sell those planes for just $2.1 million, even though independent estimates valued them at over $6 million. While KQ sold planes due to financial struggles and the need to cut costs by removing older, expensive-to-operate aircraft, many questioned whether this deal had benefited KLM more than KQ. Despite these issues, it's worth noting that KQ also benefited significantly from the KLM partnership over the years. In 2016, Michael Joseph, former CEO of Safaricom, joined KQ's board as chairman, bringing his successful business experience to the struggling airline. Despite his appointment and various financial interventions, including a $200 million loan from the Afri-Exim Bank and a $40 million loan from the government, KQ's problems persisted. The situation worsened, with KQ posting a staggering pre-tax loss of $29.7 billion in 2015, the largest corporate loss in Kenya's history, following a $25.7 billion loss the previous year. The liberalization of Kenya's airspace through the Open Skies policy allowed foreign carriers like Emirates to operate more freely, creating even more competition. Middle Eastern airlines such as Qatar, Emirates, and Etihad began capturing KQ's market share with more convenient and affordable flights, which benefited the consumers but hurt the struggling KQ.
Level of Open Skies policy, where you can fly anywhere you want. You just have to apply and you can fly, but you have to get permission to. It's the result of you see so many airlines flying. Of course, we would rather not that happen. Of course, as an airline, I'd rather be a monopoly, of course. But that's not realistic. That's not going to happen.
Despite Ngunze's optimism about turning things around, he resigned in 2017. His tenure marked one of the airline's lowest periods, though not all the challenges could be attributed solely to his leadership. In 2017, Kenya Airways was in serious trouble. The airline was drowning in debt and losing money fast. They needed a miracle worker. That's when they brought in Sebastian Mikosz, a Polish airline expert known for fixing struggling airlines. By 2018, Kenya Airways owed more than $750 million, a staggering amount that seemed impossible to repay. The Kenyan government had to step in just to keep flights running. Mikosz came with a bold plan called Project Simba. His main idea was for Kenya Airways to take over Nairobi's main airport, JKIA, similar to how Ethiopian Airlines operates its airport in Addis Ababa.
Actually, if you put all these assets together, which all the countries around us, you have all this money in one pot. It doesn't mean, again, because I know the questions that will be asked, that I want to jump on the bank account of Jomo Kenyatta and swoop the money that is there and put it in KQ. But I want to have a system, and this is what we recommend, where each passenger that lands reinforces Kenyan aviation system, not only KQ, and we are an essential part, but I cannot do without Jomo Kenyatta, they cannot do without me. We are the only carrier interested in growing the hub, the only one. Everybody is interested just picking the passenger and sending it to its own hub.
However, this plan faced pushback from the airport authorities and workers' unions who are worried about job losses and unfair competition.
What they were trying to do was very sensible. They were not trying to take over Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. They wanted a joint venture with Jomo Kenyatta International Airport to reduce the cost for running Kenya Airways, because then in that joint venture, they would not have to pay high parking fees like others do. They would But then Parliament has gone around and said the same government, which they didn't want to go into a joint venture, should now nationalize Kenya Airways. If you nationalize it, you have to recapitalize it. If you recapitalize it, the money must come from somewhere, from the treasury. So we should be very clear what argument that we are making.
Competing with big airlines like Emirates and Ethiopian was another huge challenge. These companies had the backing of their government and were 100% state-owned, meaning they could easily get money when needed. Kenya Airways, being partly owned by private investors, didn't have this luxury, making it feel like they were fighting with one hand tied behind their back.
I mentioned before, our biggest competitor is Ethiopian Airlines.
Yes.
Very efficient airline, very smart, very big fleet, very new fleet, much bigger than ours and probably going to double and triple in the next few years. But they state-owned, state-funded, no unions or anything like that. So
the situation became even more complicated when Mikosh had a falling out with the airline's pilots. He claimed the pilots were overpaid, saying each made about 1.6 million shillings a month, which took up half of the airline's wage bill, even though the pilots only contributed to 13% of the staff. The pilots quickly responded, saying they earned much less than that, and felt they were being unfairly blamed for the airline's struggles. But it wasn't all bad news. In October 2018, Kenya Airways made history by launching the first ever direct flights between East Africa and New York. This was a big deal, opening up new doors for tourism and businesses between Kenya and America.
Nairobi, New York, non-stop, 15 hours. Wow, game changer, game changer. Oh yeah.
The airline also expanded its routes across Africa and began updating its fleet with the newer, more efficient planes. Despite these achievements, the airline's financial troubles continued. By 2019, Mikosh decided to step down earlier than expected, citing personal reasons. In 2019, after Sebastian Mikosh stepped down as CEO, Kenya Airways turned to Alan Kilavuka to steer the airline through uncertain times. Kilavuka, who had successfully led Jambojet, KQ's low-cost subsidiary, was appointed acting CEO in early 2020 and officially took over in April. Under his leadership, Jambojet had grown rapidly and become a key player in East Africa's budget airline market. Little did Kilavuka know he would soon face one of the toughest challenges in aviation history: the global COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 hit KQ hard, grounding flights and leaving airports empty. The airline's already shaky financial situation worsened as passenger numbers plummeted. Kilavuka and his team had to act quickly. They implemented aggressive cost-cutting measures, slashing staff and restructuring operations to reduce losses. With passenger flights down, they leaned heavily on cargo services, which became a lifeline for the airline's revenues. Despite these efforts, KQ reported massive losses in 2021, struggling with the ongoing effects of the pandemic, rising fuel prices, and mounting debt. To recover, the airline launched a multi-year strategy focused on efficiency, expanding revenue streams, and boosting its cargo business. Additionally, KQ sought government support, explored debt restructuring, and looked for new investment partnerships to stabilize its finances. In 2023, KQ launched Project Karu, a bold plan aimed at strict financial discipline, operational efficiency, and long-term sustainability. The airline also ventured into unique projects like a pyro-diesel plant to convert plastic waste into diesel fuel and a water bottling facility, both aimed at cutting operational costs and generating new revenue streams. These efforts started to pay off. By the end of 2023, KQ posted an operating profit of 10.5 billion, a major turnaround from the 5.6 billion loss in the previous year. This marked a significant milestone in the airline's recovery journey. This was the first profit KQ made since Project Mawingu flopped over a decade ago. 2024 brought even better news. For the first time in over a decade, KQ recorded a post-tax profit of 513 million Kenya shillings. The Kenyan government reaffirmed its commitment to supporting KQ, acknowledging the airline's strategic importance. Looking forward, Kilavuka announced that KQ was focusing on a pan-African expansion strategy aiming to establish hubs for KQ in East, West, and Southern Africa.
Because we are looking at a three-hub strategy: East Africa, South Africa,
And West.
and West Africa. So, and investors are quite excited about that prospect, okay? Because you buy into Kenya Airways, you buy into the Pan-African Airline Group discussion.
The airline is also actively seeking a strategic equity partner by the end of 2024 to help reduce the debt and secure long-term financial stability. KQ's struggles are rooted in a mix of poor management choices, external factors like COVID-19, and possibly even political interference. Former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua openly declared that state capture contributed to KQ's troubles.
We have had very serious discussion with the Kenya Airways. You know, Kenya Airways, their planes are always full, you know. They have the highest fares in this continent, yet they make losses because of state capture. Because the people who lease the aircrafts, they overcharge Kenya Airways because of state capture, you know?
But KQ's story is still unfolding. With Alan Kilavuka's leadership and new strategies, the airline may yet to return to its former success. However, with fierce competition in the airline industry, will KQ's efforts be enough to secure a lasting comeback? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe for more insightful stories from Kenya.